So we're going to talk about Mitra, the APE² platform today. We have a title today, Accelerate App Development by 20 to 30%, which is a significant thing, and you would definitely understand what we are talking about when we talk about acceleration with Mitra APE² platform. Right, so today I'll be presenting together with Nalinda. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Sudhar Hidashankar, and I'm the CTO and the Chief Architect for Mitra Innovation. Joining with me today for this webinar is Nalinda, is the lead architect for APE² platform. So without further ado, let's jump into what all APE² is about. Right, so before going to that, let me just go through the agenda and what we are trying to cover today. We'll be talking about what is APE² platform. I'll give you a brief what it does and all that. We'll also talk about the motivations behind APE² platform and why we wanted to develop it. And at Mitra, we have different frameworks for application development and to manage that whole process. So I'll talk about the process that we use to app development AI5 and how it works hand in hand with APE² platform. That's all about the boring stuff, and then we'll get to the exciting stuff, which will be done by Nalinda, the real application demo scenario. All right. Okay, so let's talk about APE. What is APE² platform? So APE² platform, ideally you can see the words APE². This actually stands for Accelerator Platform for Entrepreneurs and Enterprises. So the secret is actually lies behind this particular sentence. You know, you're talking about accelerator. So what we are trying to accelerate here. Just to give you an example, I've been in this industry nearly 2 decades, and if I think about 10 years ago, what customers expected opposed to what customers expect now is very different. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the customer had patience. You know, they actually sit down with you and took a long time. A project took about 1 to 2 years to complete, and it's a long process. They waited and all that. But if you look at now, the customers, you know, could be entrepreneurs or enterprises, they want their solutions to be built very quickly. They want the ROM to be built in 1 day. And they want that to be the lowest cost possible. And this is a big challenge that we are facing, because every entrepreneur comes to us, or every enterprise comes to us with a solution, asking for a solution. They want to have it very fast. And yet they actually expect all the qualities of that application to be inside. You know, they have to have end-to-end DevOps built in. They have to integrate all the systems together. They want to have analytics, and they want to have it very low cost, and you know, so on and so forth. So this was a constant challenge that we were facing. You know, we've been in providing solutions for enterprises as well as entrepreneurs for quite some time now. So one of the key challenges we faced was that all these facts putting together, how we deliver and meet the expectation. So with the collective experience we had with all our customers, we wanted to just sit back and you know, take a step back and think, do we really want to do this every day? You know, like you know, put all these things together, reinvent the wheel, do the things that we do over and over again, or else could we bring something innovative to the table? I mean, Mitra is all about the innovation. You know, like we like to innovate, we like to do things differently. So we thought, okay, let's kind of build a platform. It's not only a software platform, but also includes a lot of processes inside that and see how we can talk to a customer and get his idea into the ideation, and when we productize it, when we bring the technology blueprint into that, how can we get into the development stage immediately without spending so much of time and building the architectures and building the environment. Ideally, what you do in your entire sprint zero, why not we take a big leap and directly get into the development so that the development team can start development immediately without worrying about your complete architecture, how it is going to get deployed, how your continuous integration work, how your source code repository works, and all that. So that's what we wanted to do with APE, and that's the acceleration we are talking about. From your idea, we directly take you, for a client, in terms of a client, we directly take the client into a very fast pace, and we start immediate development, and you can see the results very quickly. Explaining APE, that's basically about it. So in the APE2 platform, we ensure from the ideation, from the architecture initial technology blueprint, that we can design, just like you imagine you're just whiteboarding your solution components, like you say, okay, I have a server, and this is where my microservice is going to sit in, and this is where my data access layer is going to sit in, this is my database, and this is how it is going to connect to service component, and I want to integrate it with the different components. This is how it's going to work. All we do is we just whiteboard everything, and then we take that and give it to an engineer, and then he comes up with a layer diagram, put on the sequence diagrams, and that is passed to the development team. And then you derive the deployment architecture from that. You go to a cloud environment, you come up with your deployment architecture there. So what if you can design the same thing in a workbench, just your solution components, you drag and drop and say, okay, this is how my cloud environment looks like, this is where my database, this is my service, and this is how my application will look like. And what if there was a button for you to click, and that whole solution architecture that you envisioned is going to get built in a cloud environment with a prototype, with a boilerplate version of the applications that you're trying to build. I'm talking about all your configurations are done and met bare minimum, so that you don't have to really worry about how to create a cluster and go about configuring stuff. And that is all built for you, and it is ready in a source code repository. So that's what we're trying to achieve with APE2. So that's the automation part we're talking about, and built-in DevOps from the beginning to the end. You have all DevOps going on continuously, and the system integration. This would actually reduce a tremendous amount of time that you would put to the project, and as a result of that, you would have a very much reduced cost. So we've been trying that with a lot of clients, and the results are overwhelming. They really like the idea, because we were able to actually get their acceleration, their project accelerated into a very good position. And the best part is the reference architectures. So when we build a solution for a client, and imagine that particular solution can be reused against any other project which is similar coming up. Like talk about projects, they're most of the time similar. Of course, they have significant differences when it comes to the architecture and all that. But how they deploy and how they are being clustered, how you achieve resilience, how you achieve high availability is almost the same. So when you build a solution like that, imagine that you can reuse that to build the exact solution. Just emailing it with a file, and you just open it, and then your architecture is built. I mean, that's the level of sophistication we're talking about with APE2. So going back to, yeah, talking about motivations behind developing APE². I mean, that's basically what I talked about in the previous slide. So a few concepts that we actually worried about is over-the-wall engineering. As I said, you whiteboard something, the architects would come up with your layered architecture, solution architecture, deployment architecture, you pass it back to the team, and they would just implement that. And somewhere down the line, something is lost, like the communication gap. They are not actually implemented what the architect envisioned, and you go back to the architect and review, go back to the development team, and there's always this over-the-wall engineering concept. So opposed to concurrent engineering, where all this architecture, the design is embedded inside the whole process along with DevOps, which would actually reduce your cost in terms of going forward and developing your platform or the application. And also the time to market factor, imagine a client would need to release a particular feature as fast as possible. And the most important fact for him is to time to market. Want to market his software instead of talking about it. He had promised his investors that I'm going to come up with this software, but if the whole development arm is taking a very long time to implement, somebody else might implement the similar solution, and you would actually lost that opportunity, and that's a huge opportunity cost. So in terms of time to market, we can actually use APE to develop a bare minimum version or a minimal viable product, MVP, as far as possible, and you're on the way with a great product. Right. So I need to talk about AI5, which is accelerated innovation with 5 steps. That's one of the key signature frameworks of Mitra innovation. So we have a unique process for any entrepreneur or enterprise who comes to us asking for a solution. So what we do is we get the idea, and it's a whole process, like this is more like a 2 weeks client on site, or the client comes down to our offices, sit down together with us. It's a whole process that we take through. We ideate, we get the idea, we ideate it, and we try to productize, then we build and operate, and then we evolve. So this is a unique process. I think you might need this one whole webinar talking about AI5. Why I wanted to bring this slide was to bring in the 3rd step and the 2nd step. That's where we actually apply APE into the platform. When you productize and when you build, APE is going to be our primary platform to productize and build our solutions. That's where we actually build the blueprint, and there itself we bring in APE, and you will have the complete application built from there and goes together until the product evolves. So that's roughly about AI5 and how APE works hand in hand. So that's all about the boring stuff, and I really need to get into the demo, and I need to give it to Nalinda to show what actually APE can do. So let me just pass it to Nalinda here. Nalinda, over to you.
Thanks, Sudaraka. Hi all. Hope you can see my screen clearly. So what you see now is the starter page for APE². So as Sudaraka mentioned, APE² is sort of the de facto method of deploying.
Nalinda, I think we can't see your screen yet.
Okay. Are you able to see the screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, this is the starter page for APE². So APE² has been sort of the de facto method of deploying cloud-based architectures here at Mitra, simply because it's blazing fast and reliable, especially in deploying enterprise-ready applications. So we've been serving a few customers through APE, and we've seen remarkable results throughout. Okay, so without further ado, I'll jump into the APE² workbench. So I'll start with a new profile. So what you see on the screen is basically the APE² workbench, where on the very top you see a toolbar with a bunch of controls that controls the canvas area, and onto the left you see a toolbox with different components that are categorized into certain groups based on the purpose they serve and also the provider. And in the middle what you see is the canvas where we play around with these individual components. So basically there are four groups: AWS components, start apps, WS tool related components, and repository components. Also we are continuously improving the toolbox area and continuously adding stuff here to support different environments and different features on the cloud. Apart from the functional differences, you have behavior-wise you have mainly two different components. One is disconnected components such as this AWS IAM role, where it's going to serve a static configuration purpose. And there are other components which can be connected to different other components as well. So for the demonstration, let me start with a brief, rather small example, and let me build on top of that and explain what sort of capabilities that APE² provides. We can start with a clean slate. For this demonstration, I'm going to assume that our deployment is going to be AWS. I'm going to start with a isolated AWS IAM component, which is an identity and access management component where you define the credentials that you use to connect to the AWS console. So I'm going to grab my credentials here. We're going to save it. What you see on the right is the property pane that is specially for the IAM components. Likewise, when you select different type of components, you get different type of property pane. So for this demonstration, I'm going to go with a containerized approach where all these components will be deployed as microservices on the AWS ECS. So for the cloud formation stack, I need to grab my save it. And these start apps are basically ECS container definitions. So to serve our purpose, I'm going to choose a Spring-based backend, which is a simple backend that's going to return simple entities. And I'm going to connect that to the CloudFormation stack to signify that all these components are on the same ECS cluster. And I'm going to add a Angular-based front-end scaffolding. So we basically have different scaffoldings, and we are in the process of implementing much more. It's just a matter of having a Docker container with additional ECS-based parameters. So instead of just passing or requesting the information from the Spring service, I'm going to introduce or rather add a WSO2 API manager component so that going forward that I can have many features implemented on top of the API manager, like throttling and security features. So I'm going to connect the same cluster, and I'm going to connect these containers to each other to signify that each of these are connected, so that the request flows from the Angular front end to the API manager and through to the Spring backend. So once the whole thing is deployed, the API manager by default will publish and subscribe to a sample API that's going to talk to the Spring-based service. Okay. And since this is a basic scaffolding project, I would like immediately to work with the code base that sets the Angular front end. So what I'm going to do is grab a GitHub component and link it with the Angular front end to signify that I'm going to edit the source for the Angular startup. I'm going to grab my GitHub information. This is my GitHub auth token. And for the GitHub URL, I'm going to create a new repository. I'm going to name it APE² demo. I'm going to create it here so that I can have a reference to it. Or I've copied the GitHub URL. Coming back to APE, paste it. At this moment, everything is set and done to realize this simple architecture at the WSO2 cloud, sorry, AWS Cloud environment. So I can simply click on build now, then it will going to build this environment plus create the GitHub repo that I can clone and edit it. So I'll click on build. So immediately you can see the CloudFormation stack is being created. So let's look at the repo again. Hopefully it should have the Angular sources already injected with the scaffolding artifacts. You can now go and edit whatever to suit the exact client requirement. Meanwhile, underneath on the AWS side, as you can see, the CloudFormation stack is being created. This will take a good 10 to 12 minutes to completely build. And if you look at it on the AWS side, this is what's happening underneath, under the hoods. So basically, you're going to have a elastic load balancer, which is going to balance the load for the single EC2 instance that we created. And this EC2 instance is part of the ECS cluster, where it runs the ECS service. ECS service is bound to a certain task definition, which has all the Docker-based containers that we set in APE² as the start apps. Plus default security and the load balance security instance will be set by default. And the instances will be protected by the EC2 instance roles and the EC2 instance profiles. Okay. Since it's going to take some time, I'll go back and illustrate on how we can extend on this architecture. So what you can do is say, for example, I can have a WSO2 ESB instance where the API manager instance directly talks to. And this ESB instance can call many number of third-party applications. So we provide a number of connectors for WSO2 ESB instances where with the support of WSO2 team, where they have published whole number of different connectors to third-party services. Plus, there are few that we at Mitra developed, like the OneDrive connector. So we can simply connect these connectors. And you get different properties to configure the security and the access for the certain API. And this ESB instance can serve a React-based frontend that is running on a separate CloudFormation stack. And also these connectors are validated so that they cannot be connected to other than the ESB's component. So when you are done with defining the architecture, and when basically when you are done with the deployment, you can simply save this file as an APE file that is portable to 3 environments, either Mac, Windows, or Linux. So I can say. So if I just click on new, and I can just simply open that up, and all your artifacts IDs will still be there. So I'm going to go back. Since this is going to take some time, I'm going to show you a simple sample CloudFormation stack that we deployed around 5-6 minutes ago. I'm going to grab its ELB DNS, and it's going to have the whole thing deployed. So all these entities is a simple scaffolding, Angular based. So all these values you see here are basically going through API manager to the Spring backend and coming back to the front end. Plus, if I go and open a simple to illustrate the connectors functionality, I can even show you a simple stack that I created. That's also not so long ago, maybe a few minutes before the demo. Yeah, okay, here it is. So this is a simple another deployment that I did maybe around 5-6 minutes ago. I have configured a capsule connector plus a OneDrive connector. So this is basically connecting to my capsule API or the capsule backend So I just listed all the parties there, and also for the OneDrive, I'm just listing down whatever the files that are stored in my OneDrive. So I'm doing a simple search on the PDF query. That's basically it. Sudarga, is there anything that I need to add?
I think you perfectly illustrated what APE can do, Nalinda, and I think everybody should have seen how fast we can actually connect components and build a reference architecture which is actually workable, and from there onwards a development team can easily pick up, and you don't have to have the burden of going through and configuring stuff, because you have the complete configuration done, and it's a matter of certain tweaks that you have to do. And you can imagine the time that it would save, for you to get the WSO2 stack. I mean, like Mitra is actually one of the preferred partners of WSO2, so we use WSO2 components widely. One would, know whoever uses WSO2 to deploy that and configure, and it takes a lot of time. So actually using something like APE would actually give you a good advantage to get this stack done very quickly. So that's the key advantage that we see here. So in terms of the future of it, like APE keep evolving, like we bring a lot of new things. In terms of architectural components, we are bringing in more and more connectors, more and more WSO2 components, and different AWS components and all that. So that's only the AWS cloud, but we are actually bringing it to different deployment targets. That's one of the key things. What you see here now is only AWS, but internally we have the R&D pipeline going on, and we are keep on building for different deployment targets. For an example, this could be done in Azure as well. So you would see another tab with all the tool set if you want to do the same thing, and if you want to deploy the same solution in Azure. And again, you're working on deploying the whole stack as a virtual box instance. In that case, you can do the deployment in your local environment by targeting Oracle's VirtualBox. So there are a lot of things that we are trying to bring in to APE. The good thing is we learn every day from our clients, and we try to adapt that into APE and try to make APE as a very sophisticated platform that could serve a lot of that could solve a lot of problems that we are facing, which we believe that common for any other client as well. So ultimately, we are trying to do is find a general solution that can make our clients happy, if I put it in very simple terms. So I think that's basically about it, about the demo, and I think we can actually go for questions. So if you have any questions, you can put it into the chat window so that we can start answering them. We probably have another 10 minutes. Then we can actually wrap up our session. Okay, we have a question. When would be the Oracle VirtualBox version be available? One thing that I wanted to clarify is that APE is not actually a product that we are kind of releasing outside to use. It's actually, for now, it's actually internal product that we are actually using inside Mitra to build products and accelerate. But we do have plans probably in 2017 fourth quarter, something that we have planned in R&D pipeline to make APE open source. We're still having discussions, and probably we might make APE open source. which would be, could be used by anybody else. So in terms of Oracle VirtualBox, yes, it is under the pipeline of R&D. So we will have release very soon for Oracle R&D. There's another question, how long would it take to add more components to interact with APE²? Does it also support deployment on Rackspace and Azure? Nalinda, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so what we are doing is we are continuously improving on doing R&D around how we can improve APE² to support multiple platforms. That's definitely something that's on the pipeline. And so Azure platform is something that we are even currently working on. So hope that it answers the question.
Right. There's another question. Does APE² platform also support configuration of production monitoring and notifications? How do you also set up database to project architecture? Can we connect across multiple databases and define different drivers to set up connection pools easily? Yes, I think it's a very good question. So in terms of production monitoring, definitely that's one of the things that we have thought of, because we definitely need to bring in production monitoring. So in terms of cloud-based environments, it's a matter of connecting the native cloud monitoring system. I mean, if you talk about AWS, there is CloudWatch. If you talk about Azure, there is Azure Complete Platform Monitor Platform. So we could actually bring the native cloud component for your production monitoring. But then again, if you prefer a different level of product monitoring, so let's say if you want to do log shipping using Logly or something like that, of course this is another connector that we can actually build, because Logly has a very nice API which we can actually bring as another connector which we can plug into the application, and then we can have that application implemented pretty easily. So the databases, again, yes, databases we actually plan to have, because just as Nalinda showed, implementing the database would be pretty simple, just as having another Docker container and have it inside, have a blueprint of any MySQL or Postgres instance inside that, or else we configure Amazon RDS instance for that matter. I hope that answered the question. So it's another question. Do your plans include project documentation as well as your environment configuration? Yes, that's a very good question. So one of the things that we are trying to integrate is Jira. I mean, we treat Jira as our de facto standard. Acclerator components basically is Jira and Confluence. So we want to get Confluence connected to our platform so that whenever we build these components, we completely have the metadata of the platform that we are building. So we can actually pick what servers we are deploying and their configurations, which we can transfer directly to Confluence, and your Confluence pages using the Confluence API, we can actually craft this whole thing so that your configuration, the environment enterprise configuration, will be documented in a very standard way. So that's also Right. Another question, is it extendable to facilitate some data warehousing components in future? Yes, definitely. That's one of the key things, because that is a high demand thing that we have to actually bring in. We're already planning to get some Amazon Redshift going on with a platform, and also when it comes to Azure, we plan to bring in some SQL Server stuff as well. I think that's about it with the questions, and also with the time that we have had. I hope everybody enjoyed this webinar about APE², APE², and hope to see you again with a very interesting set of features in our next webinar. Thank you, everybody. Good night and good morning, based on where you are. Thank you.